Welcome to the boring story about the old printer and Charles' quiet home office. In a small town, nestled between rows and rows of identical suburban houses, Charles sat in his home office. This room, unlike the neatly organized spaces of his neighbors, was an eclectic mix of papers, books, and old coffee mugs. It was a room of thoughts. Cluttered? Yes, but each item told a story. Each pile a testament to Charles' musings over the years. Dominating one corner of the room sat a desk, a relic from a time long past. The desk bore witness to the weight of an ancient computer and the star of our tale, a printer that had seen better days. At least a decade old, the printer was a chunky piece of machinery. Its faded gray exterior blended seamlessly with the thick layer of dust that had settled over it. Some edges were chipped, showcasing tiny glimpses of a once shiny inner shell. The power indicator, designed to emit a sharp, radiant light when it was new, now emitted a soft, lethargic blink. It was as if the printer itself was tired, taking slow breaths, waiting for its eventual retirement. It wasn't that Charles hadn't thought of replacing it. Quite the opposite. In fact, each failed print job, each paper jam, each unrecognizable error message was a stark reminder that its glory days were over. But like most things in that room, the printer held sentimental value. It was a gift from a dear friend, someone Charles no longer had the pleasure of speaking to. It had printed his first novel draft, countless letters to publishers, and dozens of photos of cherished memories. Yet, like all machines, time had taken its toll. The printer's performance had waned. It groaned and whirred in protest with each print command. The ink cartridges, designed to be a specific shade of cyan, magenta, and yellow, now spewed out unpredictable colors. Charles often found himself squinting at pages, trying to discern if the text was a very dark blue or just black. The distinction hardly mattered, except when it did. As another paper jammed, Charles sighed. He knew it was time. His trusty companion needed a successor. The quest for a new printer was about to begin. The first incident had been during a particularly chilly evening. Charles had been working tirelessly on a business report, the kind that had to be perfect down to the last footnote. He'd taken his time, ensuring each page was formatted correctly. Each graph accurately represented the data, and each conclusion was backed by solid evidence. Feeling satisfied with his work, he clicked on the print icon, eager to see the fruit of his labor. The printer buzzed into life, its familiar hum filling the room. But as Charles collected the printed sheets, he noticed the lines of text were not as sharp as they should be. The ink appeared streaky, and the text faded in places, making some parts nearly illegible. Charles frowned, running his fingers over the text and smudging the already poor quality print. He attempted to reprint, fiddled with the ink cartridges, and even gave the printer a gentle shake, hoping to jog its memory back to better days. Alas, the report remained subpar. Incident 2 occurred a few weeks later. It was his mother's birthday, and Charles had sifted through old photo albums, picking a heartwarming picture of the two of them from his childhood. He remembered the glee he felt, imagining the joy it would bring to her face. The printer, however, had other plans. As the image began to form on the paper, Charles watched in horror as their skin tones took on an unsettling shade of green. He looked less like a happy child and more like a character from a low budget sci fi film. Disappointment weighed heavily on Charles as he eventually settled on a store bought card. The special moment lost to the printer's whims. The third incident was the final straw. Charles had been looking forward to a classical music concert for months. He had reserved a seat in the front row, right in the center. On the day of the concert, he decided to print his ticket. As the printer pulled in the sheet, it suddenly halted midway. A paper jam. Charles tried to remain calm, carefully prying open the printer's compartments, hoping to rescue the half-printed ticket. After several tense minutes, he managed to extract the crumpled paper. The ink smeared and the barcode possibly ruined. Now, every machine has its own quirks. Some quirks are endearing, reminders of shared history and past challenges, but some, like Charles' printers, were more sinister, always lurking, waiting for the most inopportune moment to strike. To further his frustrations, Charles recalled the particular type of ink this relic used. Tree-color cartridges were its sustenance, and for reasons Charles never quite understood, the black ink always seemed to be running on empty. Perhaps the printer had a taste for the expensive stuff, or maybe it was just another quirk of an old machine. Either way, it meant frequent, costly replacements. And even when the ink was fresh, there was no guarantee of a flawless print. He often found himself spending hours online, reading forums and watching tutorial videos, hoping to find a solution to his printer woes. He learned about dots per inch and how it affected print quality, though the technical jargon often left him more confused than enlightened. As the days turned into weeks, the signs were clear. The printer had served its time, and Charles' patience had worn thin. It was time for a change. He still had the user manual of his old printer. It was a bulky booklet, its pages yellowed with age. Its cover proudly displayed the model number, Pixel Max 2300 XP. He flipped it open, deciding to acquaint himself with the nitty-gritty of his printer specifications before venturing out to buy a new one. The introduction section was a collection of generic praises for the model, with phrases like state-of-the-art technology for the era and optimized for the best printing experience. But Charles quickly skipped past these, landing on the section titled Technical Specifications. The first item was the printer's dimensions. The printer was approximately 17.5 inches in width, 14.3 inches in depth, and 7.1 inches in height. It weighed approximately 18.5 pounds without the ink cartridges installed. To Charles, these numbers meant very little, but he imagined how his desk would feel without the bulky presence of the printer. He would have so much extra space. He determined that he could probably even afford to leave a coffee cup on the desk and not feel guilty. Maybe even two. Next came the printer's resolution. It boasted a maximum color resolution of 4800 by 1200 dots per inch for color and 600 by 600 dots per inch for black. Charles tried to recall the explanation about dots per inch he had once read online. Essentially, the higher the dots per inch, the better the print quality. But he pondered over the real-life implications. Would he really spot the difference between 48 dots per inch and 5,000 dots per inch? The ink cartridges were up next. The printer used a combined tri-colored cartridge model, which housed the cyan, magenta, and yellow inks, and a separate black ink cartridge labeled BK12. The tricolored cartridge boasted a page yield of approximately 312 pages, assuming that there's 5% coverage, while the black cartridge, always seemingly running out, offered up to 450 pages. Charles remembered a time when he tried to save money by purchasing off-brand cartridges, which resulted in even more peculiar print colors and a stern warning from the printer software about using non-genuine cartridges. But life is a game of risk, right? Printing speeds were another factor. The Pixel Max 2300 XP claimed to print black and white documents at a speed of up to 8.7 pages per minute and 5.4 for color documents. There were footnotes explaining that these speeds could vary based on the complexity of the document, the type of paper used, and whether the printer had been used recently. Charles couldn't help but smirk, thinking of the countless times he waited, watching the slow dance of the paper feeding into the machine, with all the extra hours he would save with a faster printer. Charles began to envision all of the riveting tasks he could fit into his newfound time. He could meticulously sort through his sock drawer, pairing the slightly faded blue socks with their respective mates, a task he'd been putting off for months. Perhaps he could leisurely leaf through last week's newspaper, lingering over the minor updates in the community announcement section or cross-referencing weather predictions with his own recollections of the day. He might even find the time to organize his spice rack in alphabetical order, ensuring that basil and bay leaves were appropriately separated from pepper and oregano. The possibilities were endless. The paper handling specifications took up an entire page. The input tray could handle up to 100 sheets of plain paper, 20 sheets of photo paper, or 10 envelopes. It even supported various paper sizes for virtually any work project he could ever imagine. The types of paper it supported covered everything he needed. It supported plain paper, high-resolution paper, super high-gloss photo paper, and so forth. Charles vaguely remembered purchasing matte photo paper, only to find it wasn't the ideal choice for text-heavy documents. The printer's connectivity was limited, to say the least. It supported a USB 2 connection and, surprisingly, a parallel port, which was outdated even when Charles bought the printer. Wireless printing? Bluetooth? Those were the stuff of dreams for the Pixel Max 2300 XP. And then there were power specifications. The printer had an input voltage of 100 to 240 VAC, with a frequency of 50 to 60 Hz. It consumed around 13 watts when operational, 1.3 watts in standby mode, and just 0.6 watts when turned off but still plugged in. Charles never considered how much energy the printer consumed, but these numbers made him wonder about the potential savings with a newer model. By the end of his reading, Charles felt both informed and exhausted. The sheer amount of detail, the peculiarities of the printer's design, and the depth of the specifications had both enlightened him and successfully bored him. He closed the manual, realizing that the journey to find a replacement was going to be quite the adventure. With his printer's specifications fresh in his mind and a hint of anticipation in his step, Charles found himself entering the large glass doors of Tech Haven, the town's most renowned electronics store. The familiar hum of air conditioning greeted him, offering a short break from the day's muggy weather. As he ventured further in, the scent of new plastic and boxed-up tech filled his senses. He remembered coming to the store years ago, back when his old printer was considered top of the line. Now the aisle dedicated to printers seemed transformed. Instead of a handful of models, the shelves were brimming with options. Sleek designs, vibrant touch screens, and promises of unparalleled performance caught his attention from every direction. His first observation was the newfound emphasis on all in one models. These weren't just printers, they were scanners, copiers, and even fax machines. Charles recalled the numerous times he'd wished he could scan a document directly at home instead of visiting the local library. There was a distinct appeal in having a machine that could do it all. A nearby stand boasted printers with wireless capabilities. Charles picked up a promotional pamphlet and learned about the wonders of printing directly from smartphones, tablets, or even remotely from the cloud. The idea of printing a document from his living room without needing to switch on his desktop was undeniably enticing. As he moved further down the aisle, his eyes landed on an intriguing section labeled Eco-Tank printers. These models, according to a chatty store assistant, didn't use traditional cartridges. Instead, they had refillable ink tanks. Charles imagined the convenience of pouring ink rather than fumbling with cartridges. The same assistant mentioned how these models were often more cost-effective in the long run, especially for those who printed frequently. Yet not all was smooth sailing in Charles' exploration. He came across printers boasting incredible print speeds, up to 22 pages each minute for black and white documents and 18 pages for color. Imagine all the socks I could match in that saved time, Charles thought with a smirk, remembering his earlier musings. Next came printers that highlighted their impeccable resolution, 9600 by 2400 dpi. The numbers sounded impressive, and a sample printout of a landscape photo was indeed breathtakingly sharp. However, Charles wondered if such specifications were overkill for his modest printing needs. A particular set of printers caught his attention due to their unique selling point: automatic double-sided printing. No more manually flipping the page to print on the other side. The convenience factor was undeniable, especially for longer documents. The printer's interfaces varied too. While some models featured tactile buttons reminiscent of Charles' older printer, others boasted colorful touchscreen panels. Charles played with one, navigating through the menu with a few swipes and taps. It felt intuitive, but he wondered about the screen's longevity and potential repair costs. Lost in thought, Charles almost missed a soft voice beside him. Looking for a new printer? The store's badge identified her as Sarah, a printer specialist. Charles nodded, explaining his old printer's woes. Sarah listened patiently, nodding occasionally. She guided him through the various features, helping Charles understand the benefits of each one, but more importantly, assisting him in discerning which features were essential for his needs. Laser versus inkjet, connectivity options, print speeds, warranty details. By the time their conversation drew to a close, Charles felt informed but slightly overwhelmed. The store's vast array of choices, the multitude of features, and the sheer technological advancement since he last bought a printer were a lot to process. But as he looked around once more, taking in the gleaming machines with their promises of efficiency and convenience, Charles felt a budding excitement. This wasn't just about replacing an old piece of machinery. It was about embracing change, adapting to the new era of technology, and simplifying aspects of his life he hadn't realized were cumbersome. Sarah noticed his nervous expression and offered a comforting smile. It's a lot to take in, but remember, the right printer for you is one that aligns with your needs, not necessarily the one with the most features or the highest price tag. Charles appreciated her insight. He was reminded that technology at its core was a tool, a means to an end. He took one last stroll through the printer aisle, letting Sarah assist other customers. Each model, each brand, and each feature called out to him. vying for his attention. He found himself gravitating towards a mid-range model, an all-in-one with wireless capabilities and decent print speed. It wasn't the fanciest, nor did it boast the highest resolution, but it felt right for Charles' home office needs. As he stood there pondering his potential choice, he felt a weight lifting. The prospect of smoother prints, hassle-free scanning, and overall enhanced efficiency was enticing. The old printer, with all its quirks and memories, had served him well. But it was time for a new chapter and a fresh start. With newfound determination, Charles approached Sarah, indicating his choice. She gave an approving nod, mentioning it was a popular model with few complaints. Checking out was a blur, the exchange of money, and the printing of the receipt from a very efficient printer at the counter, and the handing over of a neatly packed box containing his new purchase. Charles left Tech Haven with a sense of accomplishment. The day had been filled with nostalgia, technical jargon, and a whirlwind of choices. But as he headed home, the boxed-up printer in his hands, Charles felt a renewed enthusiasm for the days ahead. The drive home was filled with contemplation. He mentally charted out a spot in his cluttered home office for the new device, wondering how different it would look amidst his familiar surroundings. The car's gentle hum and the soft rustling of the printer box on the passenger seat was oddly therapeutic. It was the sound of change and of progress. Parking in his driveway, he took a moment to look at his house, a structure that had seen countless seasons, memories, and changes. Just like his home, Charles mused. He too needed upgrades and refreshers from time to time. The printer wasn't just a piece of machinery, but a symbol of moving with the times. He carefully lugged the box inside, setting it down with a sense of ceremony. The unboxing, setup, and the first print job awaited him. But those were tasks for tomorrow. Tonight, he would rest and enjoy the fact that he'd stepped out of his comfort zone and into the world of modern technology. Before heading to bed, Charles took one last look at his old printer. The chipped edges, the faded exterior, and the soft blinking lights. "Thank you," he whispered, a simple acknowledgement of the years gone by. And with that, he turned off the lights, the room plunging into darkness, awaiting the dawn of a new day and a new beginning. Morning light filtered through the curtains of Charles' home office. With a cup of freshly brewed coffee in hand, he began the task of setting up his new printer. But before that, he wanted to truly understand what he had purchased. The box was plastered with buzzwords and technical jargon, some of which he recognized, while others were foreign. It was time for another dive into the world of printer specifications. He began with the term that had intrigued him the most at the store: duplex printing. His new printer had this feature, allowing for automatic double-sided printing. Charles thought about the countless times he manually flipped sheets with his old printer to achieve this effect. Duplex printing would not only save time but also paper, making it an environmentally conscious choice. Next on the list was connectivity. While his old printer was tethered by a USB cable, this new marvel could print wirelessly from any device in his house. As he read further, he learned about mobile printing, allowing him to send print jobs directly from his smartphone or tablet. There was also a mention of cloud printing, enabling him to print documents stored on cloud services. It was a brave new world of convenience. Print resolution had been a significant factor in his old printer's performance. His new printer boasted an impressive 9600 by 2400 dpi. The box had sample images showcasing the sharpness and clarity this resolution offered. Charles imagined his photographs, documents, and even the occasional greeting card coming out in pristine quality, each dot of ink perfectly placed. The term borderless printing caught his eye. This feature allowed images to be printed edge to edge without any margins. He thought about the family photos and holiday postcards he could create, giving them a professional touch right from his home office. Charles' attention then shifted to print speed. Though his new printer was just slightly faster than his old printer, it would compound over time, saving him precious minutes, if not hours of time. Another feature that had caught his attention at the store was the touchscreen interface. His new printer had a 4.3-inch color touch screen. This screen would allow him to navigate menus, select functions, and even preview documents before printing. It promised a user-friendly experience, eliminating the need for numerous confusing buttons. He noticed a section dedicated to eco-features. It was heartening to see tech companies considering the environment. The printer had an automatic shut-off feature to conserve energy when not in use. It also had an ink-saving mode for draft prints, ensuring that he used just the right amount of ink for less critical tasks. A small pamphlet inside the box spoke about ink technologies. Charles' new printer utilized 6 individual color ink tanks. This was a departure from his old tricolor cartridge system. It meant that when a particular color ran out, he'd only need to replace that specific tank, leading to potential cost savings and reduced waste. The pamphlet went into detail about the ink's composition, its quick-drying properties, resistance to smudging, and how it was formulated to resist fading over time. Unpacking the printer was an experience in itself. The box seemed to contain an endless array of cables, cartridges, manuals, and even a CD. Charles raised an eyebrow at the CD because he hadn't used one in years, and his computer didn't even have a CD drive anymore. Nonetheless, he laid everything out on the floor, meticulously organizing each item. Following the setup guide, Charles began assembling his printer. First, removing the various bits of protective tape and plastic that secured the printer during transport. Then, opening the front panel to insert the ink cartridges. He was pleasantly surprised to find the process much simpler than with his old printer. Each cartridge clicked into place with ease, and a small screen on the printer confirmed its successful installation. Next came the paper tray setup. Charles chose a mix of standard A4 paper and some glossy photo paper. The printer could automatically detect the type of paper, which he found particularly nifty. Turning his attention to the printer's touchscreen interface, he began the process of connecting it to his Wi-Fi network. Luckily, the steps were straightforward. Select the network, then input the password and wait for the connection. Then Charles remembered the CD. He picked it up and examined it, realizing it contained the printer's drivers and software. However, a small note also mentioned that the latest drivers could be downloaded from the manufacturer's website, which was a relief for Charles and his computer that doesn't have a CD drive. After downloading and installing the necessary software, Charles decided it was time for the first print job. He excitedly chose a photograph from a recent vacation. It was of a serene beach scene with vibrant blues and soft golden sands. He selected the photo, adjusted some settings, and sent it to print. As the printer came to life, Charles felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. Would it meet his expectations? The previous disappointments with his old printer were fresh in his mind. But as the image began to emerge, his doubts melted away. The colors were crisp, the resolution sharp, and the overall image was a nearly perfect representation of his memory. Eager to explore further, Charles delved into the software on his computer. He discovered a suite of editing tools allowing him to adjust brightness, contrast, and even remove red eye. There was an option to create custom calendars, greeting cards, and photo books. He realized that this printer combined with the software had unlocked a world of creative possibilities. His exploration led him to the scanning feature next. He unearthed an old handwritten letter from his grandmother, a cherished memento. He placed it on the scanner and followed the on screen prompts to digitize the letter and preserve it for posterity. The scan was clear, capturing even the smallest nuances of the faded ink and the texture of the aged paper. As the day wore on, Charles found himself immersed in this new world. He printed, scanned, copied, and even sent a test fax to a friend who was pretty amused to receive a fax in this digital age. Nightfall found Charles sitting back and relaxing with a pile of printed photos, documents, and test pages surrounding him. The journey had been enlightening. From the initial overwhelm in the store to the joys of discovering the capabilities of modern technology, he felt fulfilled. Closing his eyes, he took a moment to savor this feeling. His home office, once dominated by an aging, temperamental machine, was now rejuvenated, and with it, so was Charles' passion for printing and creativity. Weeks turned into months, and Charles found himself increasingly attached to his new printer. It wasn't just about its efficiency or the myriad of features. It was more profound than that. The printer had become a conduit, bridging the gap between the digital realm and the tangible world. One evening, as a gentle rain tapped against his window, Charles felt an urge to chronicle his family history. He had boxes filled with old photos, letters, and memorabilia, many of which were showing signs of wear and age. Using his printer's scanning capability, he embarked on a project to digitize these cherished memories. Each scanned item told a story. There were black and white photos of his grandparents in their youth, letters exchanged during the war, ticket stubs from memorable events, and even sketches he had made as a child. The process was therapeutic. As he scanned each item, he relived the associated memories, sometimes shedding a tear, sometimes breaking into laughter. Once digitized, Charles used the printer's software to organize the files. He created digital albums, categorizing photos by events, timelines, and family members. And it meant that letters were transcribed and preserved, even if the physical paper deteriorated further. His project also caught the attention of his family during a Sunday brunch. Charles showcased his digital archive by projecting images and documents onto the living room TV. His family was captivated and impressed. They shared stories and memories, and a sense of collective nostalgia filled the room. Inspired by the positive reception, Charles took his project a step further. Using the software's tools, he began creating physical photo books. He curated images, added captions, and designed layouts. And with a few clicks, he printed these books and gave them to his family members as gifts. His niece even told him that the book was priceless because everything today is digital. She also explained that having something tangible, like a physical photo book, was especially unique. Charles' home office became a hub of activity. Family members dropped by with their own photos and documents to be digitized. Charles even hosted scanning parties where everyone pitched in to share stories and collectively build their family's digital archive. Word spread beyond his family. Neighbors and friends approached him, looking for assistance in preserving their memories. Recognizing the broader impact of his work, Charles started a community project. He collaborated with the local library, setting up weekly sessions where residents could bring in their memorabilia to be digitized. The library, in turn, started building a digital archive of the town's history that's accessible to everyone. One day, as Charles was scanning a century old newspaper article for a local historian, he paused to reflect. His journey, which began with the simple need to replace a malfunctioning printer, had evolved into something monumental for himself and others. He'd become a guardian of memories, a curator of history, and a bridge between past and present generations. His new printer, once just a machine on his desk, had taken on a symbolic meaning. It represented the power of technology to preserve, to share, and to connect. It reminded Charles of the blurred line between the digital and the physical, and they could create magic when combined. The historian told Charles that history isn't just about events and dates, it's about people, their stories, and their emotions. He told Charles that his efforts helped ensure that stories live on, which is a priceless gift. Charles smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. He realized that technology, with all its complexity and advancement, was ultimately a tool. And like any other tool, its true value lay in how it was used. As the printer hummed softly in the background, Charles continued his scanning, each item telling a story, each story a testament to the rich tapestry of life.